Well, hi everyone, and greetings from Northern Michigan. This is Bob the Science Guy. You know, I started something kind of on a lark last week called Flat Earth Fakery, where I take 3 videos that I've run across where the flat earth is falsified or otherwise misrepresented their case and expose them. It seemed to go over pretty well, so I think I'm going to do another episode this week. Now, last week I put out a video on Zetetic Flat Earth and a flight from Wuhan, China to March Air Force Base in California, which stopped over for fuel in Anchorage, Alaska. The case that was presented by Zetetic Flat Earth was, in short, ridiculous. Now, Zetetic Flat Earth claimed that this flight proved the flat Earth. I showed that not only was he wrong, but he actually misrepresented a little bit of the data. Rather than make it a lesson learned, Zetetic Flat Earth doubled down on his idiocy and made another video specifically attacking me. Now, rather than give Zetetic Flat Earth the attention that he so obviously is looking for, I didn't really address that, but my friend Shawn Hawkins did. So we're going to go ahead and go over his video a little bit, and then I'm going to add a couple of small points. Number 2 is going to be Brane. Now, Brane was the subject of last week's Flat Earth Fakery with his little tilt the disc Mount Rainier photograph where I exposed him to be a fraud. However, he put out another video this week essentially saying the same thing. So we'll probably touch on that a little bit because Shawn Hawkins responded to that as well. Now, the number 3 victim is going to be the main event, and that is going to be our friend Phuket Word, who says that the sun does not light up clouds from underneath. I've had numerous requests to go ahead and debunk this, and I think I'm going to go ahead and do it. So let's cue up the music and get started. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, the first chapter of this episode is going to be on a young man by the name of Zetetic Flat Earth. From the sound of his voice at the beginning of his video, he appears to be about 12, so I want to be a little bit easy on him. In fact, I didn't make another video directly refuting his allegations in his response video, but Shawn Hawkins did. If you want to go ahead and watch his whole episode, there'll be a link to it in the description of this video. But here are some high points. Now, there were 6 main points that Zetetic Flat Earth made in his video. Number 1 was the drama over Fairbanks. This is because I noted that even though Zetetic Flat Earth claimed that this flight from Wuhan, China to March Air Force Base stopped over in Fairbanks, I said that it stopped over in Anchorage, Alaska, based on the actual flight plan of the aircraft in question, and I'll link that in the description as well. It stopped in Anchorage. It's not a big deal. Now, like most Flat Earth videos, this video by Zetetic Flat Earth contained the seeds for its own debunking right within the video. This is the page that Zetetic Flat Earth brought up to try and justify his confusion over the Fairbanks versus Anchorage issue. And right here it talks about intercontinental cargo and passenger jets plying routes between the United States and the Far East. Fairbanks is on the Great Circle course, which is the shortest air distance route between Tokyo and Chicago. Whereas Anchorage lies closest to the Great Circle course connecting Los Angeles with Beijing. As the flight was roughly from Beijing to Los Angeles, even his own source says that Anchorage would be the fueling stop, not Fairbanks. They weren't going from the Tokyo area to Chicago, which is in the Midwest. They were going to LAX. Now, the second was some silliness that he put out about Google Maps being done by the CIA, implying that since they relied on some CIA data, as he claimed, they were somehow biased and were used to hide the flat Earth. Let's go see what Shawn has to say about that.
See, where's this 21 hours and 25 minutes coming from? I'm a little confused.
Well, you should be because Google shows you strange flight times and they do not show you the stops. Why is that? Ask them. What do you want from me? When I do...
So you took it from Google, which doesn't show you the stops, but Bob used a flight program, right? A flight mapping program to show you how it does. I think Bob wins.
Okay, so the point on this one is that I actually used flight navigation software, specifically skyvector.com. And I actually put that right into the video so anybody could reproduce this themselves. That's how peer review works when you put out a statement like that. You give them the information they need to check it. Unfortunately, what Zetetic Flat Earth did was the same classic Mark Sargent mistake. Instead of looking for a direct flight from Beijing to Los Angeles, he looked for commercial flights that had multiple stopovers, which is why a 10.5 or 11-hour flight turned into 21 hours, getting from Wuhan to March Air Force Base outside of Los Angeles. He didn't seem to understand that there's a difference between a flight with multiple connections and legs and one that is a direct flight from point A to point B, like a charter. But we'll continue. Now, in addition to using rather foul and demeaning language, which is really not family rated and not suitable for my channel, although I'm sure you saw it on his graphic, we're going to go ahead and skip the ad homs and go to his next point, and that's the Great Circle Course deception. Now, let's go ahead and see what he's talking about with this Great Circle Course. Now, mind you, both of his sources indicated the Great Circle Course was the shortest distance between 2 points on the Earth, because a great circle is the shortest distance between any 2 points on a sphere, and the Earth, of course, is spherical. Now, as I told you at the beginning, Flat Earth Fakery is designed specifically to point out misinformation, misrepresentation, and outright fraud. This is a category of the latter. Now, you'll see that on Zetetic Flat Earth, what he did was he has a line going from Wuhan, China, over here to March Air Force Base. You notice it seems to follow a line of latitude. And Zetetic Flat Earth made it clear that this was the course that Google gave him. But is that really true? Let's go ahead and pull up Google Earth and see what happens when we try and draw a straight line from Wuhan, China, to March Air Force Base in Los Angeles, California. Okay, so here is Google Earth, and I've centered it on the Wuhan International Airport. So let's go ahead and back this up a little bit so we can see where we are. Now, recall that Los Angeles, there's Hawaii off in the corner, you see it? Los Angeles is off in that direction. Now let's see whether or not we can follow this line of latitude right here and just follow it right along. Oh, wait a minute, it seems to be curving, doesn't it? Over there to about Los Angeles. Will you look at that? It doesn't go straight across the Earth. It curves up to Alaska. Now, my goodness, that doesn't look at all like his illustration, does it? Okay, so let's go ahead and see if we can solve this mystery. What Zetetic Flat Earth did was he took a straight screenshot from Google Earth of a blank globe, and then he drew his own line across that globe in a straight line from Wuhan to Los Angeles. Whereas in Google Earth, it actually arcs up to Alaska, as was presented in my video. You're busted, kid. You falsified your evidence. You're caught. Because the normal path between Wuhan and Los Angeles does indeed go far north, it's really not all that different from the AE map projection, which is centered on the North Pole, versus the Great Circle Course, which is the actual flight path between Los Angeles and Wuhan. So let's go ahead and see what he has to say about that.
Cat's having a hairball.
Well, this is how your imaginary ball Earth looks like. If you have a problem with that, don't talk to me. Contact Google or CIA.
So, no, nobody's hiding Flat Earth, man. Flat Earth is non-existent. Nobody's hiding Santa. Nobody's hiding the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy or Bigfoot. Nobody's hiding that shit. They're non-existent.
That's Google Maps.
You're such a dickhead. Why do you ask me stupid questions to which you know the answers to?
And you're moving that line around.
I'm not moving the line, dumbass. I'm moving your stupid ball Earth so we can see the line from different angles. In February 2003, the CIA-funded venture capitalist firm InQ Telephone made a strategic investment in Keyhole, Inc., a pioneer of interactive 3D Earth visualization and creator of the groundbreaking Rich Mapping Earth Viewer 3D system. CIA worked closely with other intelligence community organizations to tailor keyholes. Everything we are being taught about this world is based on government information control.
Well, let me just point out a little obvious fact that you may not be thinking about, Zetetic Flat Earth. If I want to send a missile or an artillery shell over to the bad guys, I'd kind of like to know where they are, at what direction, and at what range. Wouldn't you? Do you think that the military has got a vested interest in having accurate mapping software so that they can actually see the relationships of the battlefield? How about the CIA? Do you think they might want to know where Uzbekistan is? You know, when I was a kid, we used to have these big atlases, and you'd flip from map to map to map, and they could only represent so much on a page, so sometimes you'd have to flip 10 pages to get to an area that's just below the map that you're looking at now. You got to go another 10 pages to get to the page that shows the map right below your area. So if you're, planning a trip that goes across 2 map sheets, it's kind of tedious. So with Google Earth or with Google Maps or with ForeFlight or any of this software that you can have on an iPad, you can immediately plot a course anywhere in the world. And it's very easy to do. That's a benefit. It's a benefit to the military. It's a benefit to the CIA. It's of benefit to researchers. It's of benefit to people like you and me that need to plan a road trip. But in order to do that, you have to actually understand how to use the map. So for example, if you want to plot a line from Wuhan, China to Los Angeles and see where it really is, you don't get out a ruler and just draw a straight line between the two.
All right, look at this right here. He's even admitting it right here. Azimuthal equidistant projection map. You know what that's a projection of? See, in order to project something, you have to have something to project from. And the projection is from a globe.
Well, I think that your stupid ball Earth was made by projecting our flat Earth map.
If you're going to use a tool like a map, you should know how to use it, and you should know what it is. So to suggest that the globe is somehow a projection of the AE projection map of the Earth doesn't make any sense at all. Have you ever followed that through logically? If it was a projection of the AE map itself would not be a projection. Now would it? It would be the flat Earth map. Okay, I think I've had about as much fun with this kid as I think I can stand right now. If you'd like to see the full R-rated dissection of this young man's debunk of me, head on over to Shawn Hawkins' channel. Hit him, like and subscribe while you're over there. He needs it. He's almost at 1,000, so give him a little boost. So let's move on to the next one. Now, one of the subjects of my first Flat Earth Fakery was this gentleman, Brane, which I feel is a very apt name for him, but he got the spelling wrong. And in that episode, I showed how he falsified evidence to try and support his narrative. But since I called him out again, he had to put out a video that consisted of about 10 minutes or so of ad hom attacks against me and a complete repeat of his old points that I had already debunked. He didn't have anything new, and I didn't bother with it, but Shawn went ahead and did a quick video on it. So let's just go ahead and have a look here and see if we've got anything of note.
See, this guy doesn't know when to quit. He's been debunked on this. That's a shadow of a mountain on the underside of clouds that can only happen on a sphere. Could never happen on flat Earth. This is nothing more than damage control.
Remember what I told you about flat earthers putting out these silly videos and debunking themselves? You see this video here from Brane where he's got those 5 holes and he's got the sunlight streaming through those holes directly down to another disk? You see how those lines are straight and parallel? That's because the light coming from the sun is straight and parallel. That's because the sun is very distant. If the sun was close, those light sources would splay out. But Brane is demonstrating that we have a distant sun right here with this experiment that he did. He just doesn't realize what he's looking at, and that is his major problem. He cannot comprehend the data that is right in front of his face. Now, a few minutes ago, we had this view of the mountain. And one of Brane's supporters, a guy named Brandon Toy, came out and said, I think that mountain's above the clouds. I don't see any gap between the mountain and the clouds. Well, let's go ahead and have a look at it right here. Do you not see that gap right there? I mean, seriously? You can't see the dark shadow up here, the dark mountain down there, and the bright sky between the two? Brandon? You do see that, right? I know it doesn't support your flat earth narrative, but there it is, nonetheless. Now, the other thing that Brane and his friends don't seem to understand, because they can't comprehend the geometry of this, even though I showed them a model of it on the original Debunks last summer. This part of this shadow is being cast by a sun down here that is below the peak of the mountain. It's being cast up. This part of the shadow is from that part of the mountain. Where's this part of the shadow from? It's from the lower part, the wider part of the mountain, because the sunlight is coming up like this. The shadow is not going out just from the peak. The shadow is going across the entire mountain and is shining on the cloud deck above the peak. See if you can make a model and figure that one out a little bit better.
Well, it's not completely a side view. See, the shadow's still coming at you. That's why it's still spreading out. Not quite as much as this.
It's not coming at you, dude. It's going off to the side.
Now let's see if I can make this a little clearer. Here's the top of the mountain right here. There's the gap between the top of the mountain and the clouds, and this part of the shadow right here is from the very top of the mountain. As you go further out in the shadow, you're actually catching the shadow of the lower part of the mountain, which is wider. This is not a perspective widening of that shadow, and you can tell that by looking at that side view. The reason that the shadow is wider here is that the mountain is wider down here than it is up here. This narrow shadow corresponds to the peak of the mountain. This wider shadow corresponds to further down the mountain where it's wider. Now, once again, Brane's only excuse for this is to show a picture of a mountain that is above the clouds shining down on the top of the clouds. That has nothing to do with the situation we're dealing with here. Now, for our final installment, we're going to have a look at Nick from Phuket Word. I put out a video a couple of weeks ago showing how you could tell the Earth was a sphere based on looking at sunsets and clouds. And I used this photograph, which I took just a couple of miles south of my home. Let me point out the salient features. Now, first, I want you to look right here. This is the sun, and you're just seeing the very top of the sun poking up over the horizon. This is sunset. We're looking west. Now here you see these cirrus clouds, which are high altitude clouds that are being lit from underneath to the point there's even a hot spot right here. This indicates that the sun is physically shining upward onto those clouds because its position relative to them is lower. This goes along with the sun setting behind the curve or the horizon of the rotating Earth. Now, these little cumulus clouds in the foreground are dark and unlit. That's because the sunlight from this very low sun is streaming up over the edge of the Earth above them. It's lighting up the cirrus clouds, but these clouds down here are in darkness. Now, this really bothered Phuket Word to the point that he made a video almost immediately. And the video was so silly, I didn't even bother responding to it. His argument was that these clouds down here, including this little bitty one right here, are so thick that they're physically blocking the sunlight from the sun above them. And he maintains that the sun only appears to be low due to, you guessed it, perspective, and was in reality higher than all of the clouds in this picture. These cirrus clouds were so thin the sun is shining right through them, he doesn't really account for why they're red. He doesn't account for the hot spot other than to think that maybe that's where the sun is above those cirrus clouds and it's shining below it, although you can see the sun right there. It's below it. And then he claims that these little cumulus clouds are so thick that they are blocking the sunlight passing through them. But I want to call your attention to a couple of things. First of all, notice the tops of these little cumulus clouds are dark. If the sun was shining on top of these clouds, the bottoms would be dark, but the tops would be lit up. So let's go over to his video and see what he has to say. Now, before he starts to drone on, let's take our fresh eyes and just look at his photograph taken in England. We can clearly see the sun is well above the horizon. These cumulus clouds, these cumulostratus clouds here, are dark because they are indeed blocking the sunlight from this sun. However, look at the top of the clouds. See how they're lit up? That's because the sun is higher than the top of the clouds in the sky. It just appears to be low due to perspective, and that's correct. However, the sun itself is physically shining downward onto these clouds. Unlike my picture, where the sun is very low and is shining upward onto these high altitude clouds and missing these low cumulus clouds completely. That's why they're dark. Notice they're not bright on top, unlike Nick's clouds. So let's give the floor over to Nick and let him dig himself a hole yet again.
Hello, Flat Earth researchers, debaters and debunkers. Lovely sunrise this morning here in Portishead. Of course, we see a sun that appears to be below the clouds. Do we see the bottoms of those clouds being lit up by the sun that appears to be lower than them? Of course not. If I'd have filmed this just a few minutes ago, you would have seen the sun just poking up over the horizon, and
the clouds would have been lit from below. Notice how he almost just blew it, and listen to him try and recover.
If I'd have filmed this just a few minutes ago, you would have seen the sun just poking up over the horizon, and what we do see is those clouds up there lit up. So, of course, what is this?
No, Nick, I really want you to finish your sentence. If we had filmed this a few minutes ago when the sun was just poking up over the horizon, what would the bottom of the clouds have looked like again, Nick? You were right there. You saw it. Go ahead and tell us what they would have looked like. Do you think maybe like that? Just maybe?
This is the result of perspective. It is not the result of being on a globular spinning Earth that's rotating to create this sunrise. The sun is, as we say, rising, but that's because it's simply coming closer to us on this level, stationary Earth.
And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. The shortest debunk in Bob the Science Guy history. Clouds are lit from below. End of sentence. Guys, thank you very much for stopping by. This is Bob the Science Guy signing out from Northern Michigan. Do me a favor, hit that little like and subscribe button down there. I'd really love having you on Team Bob. Maybe check out my Patreon and some of the channels that I've linked to in the description. The natural world is full of wonders. All you have to do is open your eyes to see them. Take care, guys.